Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, it's Kat. So for today's video, I'm going to be doing my October reading wrap-up. I know it's a little bit late, we're getting to like halfway into November. It's been an interesting day in America recently, and I've just been taking some time to digest some recent information. If you know, you know, which I'm sure the whole world does. So I want to talk about some of the spooky mystery thriller books that I read in October that I was super excited about. Let's get right into it. The first book that I finished in October is actually not a mystery thriller. It is a YA fantasy, and it is called The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This book follows Karu, I think that's how we pronounce her name. She lives in Prague, and she is an art student, and she basically runs errands for a demon who's kind of like her father figure. One day, she runs into a beautiful angel named Akiva, who she feels this instant attraction to, and he reveals her true identity and her true past to her. So now she has to figure out what she's going to do with this newfound information. This book, I feel like, was the OG fantasy romance or romance fantasy, because this book definitely is more romance centered than fantasy. It was very insta-lovey, but again, this is a YA fantasy from like back in the day, so wouldn't expect anything less. However, I did really love Laini Taylor's writing style. It is so beautiful and very descriptive without bordering the purple prose line. I really did love the way she described everything. I could picture and feel everything she wanted me to feel as a reader. I wasn't the biggest fan of the pacing of the story. I feel like it was very slow to begin with, and it didn't pick up until the last 100 to 150 pages when we get flashbacks of Karu's past. I would love to see more character development for our main character, so hopefully that is something that happens in the next two books. Overall, I gave it a 3-point rating. I did feel like it was okay. It's just your average YA fantasy. I could see why people really enjoyed it, and I know younger me would have enjoyed it, so I think it's kind of unfair that more adult me is judging a book that younger me would enjoy. But regardless, my experience was more of a 3-star, and I am interested in continuing on with this trilogy. Now we're going to enter our mystery thrillers of October, and first start off with Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This book is about 3 siblings who are estranged, and they reunite after several years when their mother passes away. They do inherit their mother's house. One day when they were looking through some of the boxes, they come across an old VHS tape which shows their parents hiding a dead body. With their dad out of the picture and mother now dead, these 3 siblings have to figure out what they're gonna do and why their parents were hiding this dead body to begin with. I gave this book a 4.0 star rating. I did like the writing style in this book. I felt like it was straight to the point. It was simple yet metaphorical. It was descriptive enough but not overly done. I loved how the writing depicted grief and loss for each of these siblings. I really did feel their emotions heavily, especially the oldest sibling. The pacing was slower, but it was consistent, and I feel like that's what really kept me engrossed in this story. I did really enjoy the family dynamics in this story and the relationship between the siblings and how the author depicts grief and loss and family and addiction and such. Although the ending was slightly predictable, I still think that it was a very interesting ending and a very interesting plot twist. I also really liked the multiple point of views we got from all 3 siblings and the mother from the past. Sometimes I was annoyed with these siblings because I get it, they're siblings, but they were calling each other names and just pointing each other's flaws out all the time, and it just kind of got repetitive at that point. However, I don't think it was terrible. I still enjoyed my time with it, and I will love to read more about this author in the future. Also, this cover is absolutely everything. It's so cool. After that, I read The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. I gave this book a 2.0 star rating, and I'm pretty sure this was my least favorite read for October. This book follows a British novelist who lives in NYC, and she gets engaged to her boyfriend. She goes to meet his family, and he comes from like old money, prominent, wealthy family. One day, her future father-in-law gives her a tape which has his confession on it, and now she's in this cat and mouse game where she has to navigate her fiance's weird family traditions and at the same time try to figure out the murders. First and foremost, I was under the impression, based off of this synopsis, oh no, it's not even on the back, the synopsis of the story, that this is going to be about a crazy family, you know, like a crazy murderous family. At least that is the impression I got. And it was not that at all. There's one murder in the family, that's for sure. We find who that person is at the end, and it really wasn't even anything. It wasn't surprising, it wasn't interesting, it was just bland. This family is not crazy. They're weird and they have some strange family traditions, but they're not crazy, and that is what I was really hoping to read about. The book felt so boring, like from beginning to end. And I feel like a lot of it is because we are reading from the main character's point of view and there's nothing interesting about her. She has no personality. Her personality actually is that she is a British novelist. The amount of times she mentions that she is British, by the time you get to the end of the story, even if you don't know anything that happened in the book, the one thing you'll remember is that she is a British novelist. There's a lot of references to her dark, mysterious past, but when you find out what actually happened, it wasn't all that. Throughout the book, she has this weird connection / infatuation with her father-in-law. Oh my goodness, there's so many scenes of tension between her and the father-in-law. Not even her and her fiance, her and her father-in-law. It was actually kind of weird to read about. The father-in-law's intentions behind making that tape for our main character made no sense. Honestly, it made no sense. It felt completely unnecessary. I did not like the writing in this book. It felt very pretentious. There was a lot of big words thrown in here that broke the flow of the writing. It felt like the author just kind of opened thesaurus.com and just found big words to throw in here. I get it, we're reading from the point of view of an author, so it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it just felt jarring to suddenly come upon a big word. I don't know all the big words in this book, I'll admit, so it did kind of feel like breaking my reading flow too. I'm sure this book is someone's cup of tea. It definitely was not mine. After that, I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. By the smile on my face, you can tell that this book was definitely my cup of tea. I gave this 5-star rating. This is so exciting. I love every Riley Sager book I've read so far. I was blown away by how much fun I had and how intrigued I was with this book. I read it in a matter of days. This book follows Kit, who is in desperate need of a job, so she takes up the job of a caretaker for a paralyzed elderly lady named Lenora. Lenora lives on the cliffside in a very wealthy community, and she was accused of murdering her family when she was a young girl. Kit now has to find out if these rumors are true when one day Lenora wanted to finally confess what happened that night. I truly, with all my heart, enjoyed this book so much. Like, it was the perfect spooky book to read for October. It had all these spooky, gothic, mysterious vibes, especially this book taking place on a cliffside in this huge mansion where there's all these cracks forming and sounds happening in the middle of the night. The core mystery plot was also so intriguing. It kept me on my toes. Like, I was here trying to guess who it was, who the real murderer was, but couldn't even guess. And once I got to the ending, the plot twist, there's only one thing I guessed right. Every other plot twist shocked me. I do admit the ending was just a little bit confusing. It really was. It kind of threw me off, not in the best way. For someone like me who is just barely dipping her toes in thriller books, this book did it for me. I enjoyed it so much. I'm sure more seasoned thriller readers didn't find it that amazing. I did read some reviews where people did criticize for there being too many plot twists and most of them just not making sense and the ending making no sense at all. And I get where they're coming from, but for me, I had a freaking great time. After that, I read Keep It in the Family by John Mars. This book follows Mia and Finn, a couple who move into a new house where they're hoping to renovate it. Mia is pregnant, and one day, Mia, Finn, and Finn's parents find 7 bodies stuffed in 7 suitcases in their attic. Now Mia is determined to find who these victims were and how they ended up in the attic in these suitcases. Most importantly, who the murderer is. While she's investigating all of that, she also comes across some very chilling family secrets. I did enjoy this book. I think the writing and the pacing were great and the characters were well crafted. This book can be a little uncomfortable due to some of the dark content surrounding the murders. I personally felt very uncomfortable and very unsettled being in the serial killer's mind because of their thoughts about their victims, how they want to kill them, murder them, how they pick and choose their victims. It was very, very uncomfortable. And this is coming from someone who loves true crime, who's listened and watched some graphic crime content. Who the murderers were was predictable. That plot twist didn't really get to me. Some of the plot twists were just predictable in general. However, my jaw was still on the floor. Like, there were so many jaw-dropping moments. I still was so absorbed and engrossed into this book and this weird mystery going on. The ending wasn't my favorite, but it still really caught me off guard. There was one specific scene, chapter 9, that I felt like was so out of place. So out of place with this whole story. I personally feel like it was probably a misstep on the author's part or a misstep in the editing process. Regardless, I still had a great time reading this book. I would love to read more by this author, but I might have to do a little bit more research on the content and nature of his books. I would definitely recommend this book for spooky seasons, but trigger warnings for murders of children. After that, I read The Night Swim by Megan Golden. I did not rate this book due to the subject matter. This book follows Rachel, who is an anonymous investigative journalist podcaster who is on her way to a small coastal town where a trial surrounding SA is involved, and she is going to be covering that case. While there, she gets notes and letters and messages from a young woman who wants Rachel to solve the mystery of her sister's murder, which happened 25 years ago in that same very coastal town. As Rachel digs deeper into that old case, she realizes that this town has far more secrets than she thought, and the two cases might just be connected. Like I said, I didn't rate this book due to the nature and of the content in this book. However, I will still talk about my experience. I was so triggered in this book. My PTSD symptoms came in full force. I could not stomach some of the things that was going on in here. However, due to my terrible reading OCD, I still finished it. I believe more so the last half of the book, I skimmed it because I just wanted to know who the murderer was of the old case that happened 25 years ago. I just wanted to figure that out, and I wanted to be done with this book. I went into a very dark place after reading this book, and it was very hard. I knew this book involved SA because that was the trial Rachel was covering. However, I did not expect some of the things that happened in this book. I should have done more research, honestly, and that's on me. I just assumed that I'd be able to read the kind of content that this book contained, at least this point in my life, with all the therapy and healing I did, but clearly, that's not the case. I still enjoy the book, so that is not the book's fault or the author's fault. That is completely on me to not have done research. And I feel like if there weren't some of the graphic scenes, it wasn't terribly graphic, but for me it was, I would have liked this book, to be honest. It's just I didn't have a good experience due to the triggers. I think going forward, I won't be reading books that have like essay and all that kind of stuff, because now I realize that I still am not in a place where I can read it. Regardless, the author did a wonderful job with taking so much care in writing about the subject matter in this book. She handled it with the utmost care. She brought so much light on victims and consent and the stigmatization of victims involved in SA cases, and how they're literally hounded with questions as if they're under a microscope. It's so frustrating because it's always women who have to be careful. Like, we always have to be the ones on guard. We can't drink too much. We can't party too hard. We have to be careful with what we wear. We have to be careful how we talk with boys because we don't want to give them the wrong impression. It's like we just cannot have fun and just let loose without worrying about some pervert lurking in the corner, waiting for the opportune moment. As women, we are not responsible for the raging hormones or the sick, disgusting, perverted thoughts of men. That's not our responsibility, yet it's like it is. Like, we have to shape our behaviors because we have to worry and be careful about how men perceive us. And I hate that there are systems in place that make it so. And it really was frustrating as I read this, because it's like, as women, we just cannot enjoy our life without worrying about the dangers. So that's the end of my rant. Before you read this, please read all the trigger warnings and be wary of all the trigger warnings. There were so many scenes that was very hard to digest. And honestly, if you are triggered by SA and anything associated with that, I would even go as far to say, do not pick this book up. If I knew what was going to happen in this book and some of the scenes, I personally would not have picked this book up. And again, that is not to say that this book was bad, because it wasn't. It really wasn't. It's just, if you're like me and you get triggered by those kind of content warnings, then I would recommend not, and I would just kind of pass it. Regardless, it still was a sensitive book handling very sensitive topics. And that is all. So thank you guys for sticking around. Please let me know what you've read for October and what your favorite mystery thriller books were for this year. I would love to grow my mystery thriller palette. I'm very much intrigued in the genre. Hopefully you guys are doing okay, especially for everybody who is in the United States right now and are just kind of reeling in with a lot of things that have been happening since November. Take care of yourself. It is so important that you participate in self-care, and please check up on everybody around you and all your loved ones. And I will see you next time. Bye.